Hello everyone, welcome to the part 4 of BMC Helix on-prem health check tool video series. In this video, we are going to see the overall process of how the ITSM gets installed using the Jenkins job and how to validate that Jenkins input file using health check tool. We'll do that demonstration along with the various parameters which are needed for installing the ITSM using Jenkins pipeline. And then in the end, we'll see how to provide the feedbacks or the comments on health check tool. Before I talk about the overall process of how the health check tool plays its parts in the validation of the Helix on-prem deployment Jenkins pipeline, I have opened the documentation page where the steps for installing the ITSM using the Jenkins pipeline is mentioned. Now in this doc, it's in the before you begin section, you'll see that it asks to install the common services or the platform services. Once that is done, then it sets up the Jenkins job and then you select this pipeline Helix on-prem deployment and then click build with parameters. When you click with this, you will have to enter many parameters which are documented in the BMC documentation. And at the step number 13, where it says click on build, and when the build starts, then the pipeline installation starts and it does the needed installation. The use case is for validating those many parameters. As of now, there is no direct automation available out of the box. So what we did is we have induced a parameter to get created in the Jenkins job only, which will do a dry run. That means it will not do the actual installation, but it will export the values that you entered into those parameters into a flat text file. The first link on the slide is the same documentation link which I had opened earlier. The overall process is clubbed into the 6 steps. Step number 1 is install the Helix common services. The step number 2 is to modify the Jenkins pipeline job to have a checkbox or write values to file, which is a dry run checkbox. The third is build the Jenkins job using that checkbox. This will not run the actual installation. It will generate all the input parameters that you entered into a flat configuration file. Then in the step 4, you run the health check tool. You need to export the variable ITSM pipeline config file path to the same flat file that we created in the step 3 and then run the pre-install. Once the health check tool shows everything is okay, then uncheck the checkbox of the right values to file and then rebuild the Jenkins. Then after that point, follow the same process which is there on the documentation. Now let's see those steps in detail in the talk as and also in the demonstration. We need to go onto the system where the deployment engine running Jenkins installed, and we'll do the checkout of the code for the ITSM on-prem installer files from the Git repository. Then we'll do the git clone. Then we'll cd to the directory of the installer. The vi, and then look for the word BMC underscore Helix DWPA. Right after this, add those 2 lines. Once that is done, the second step is to search for the try as per the next step, and then write this block into that at the beginning of the try catch so that it looks like this. Format it a bit. Okay. When this is done, do the git add, git commit, git push origin. Okay, now the code is changed. We'll go to the Jenkins server now, and what it says that look for the job Helix on-prem. It must have already been executed. So browse to Jenkins and select the most recent build and do the rebuild. So once its job starts, give some time so that the new code changes what we did in the Git are checked out, and then cancel the job. It may take like a couple of minutes to reach to that point where the Git checkout has been done. Let's do that. I'll pick up my last executed job, then do the rebuild, go to the end and click on the rebuild. Job is finished. Now it must have checked out the new code. I'll go back to the build with parameter, and if I see at the end, the new checkbox has got introduced. Select the checkbox of write values to file and click on build. Once this is done, then the config file will get generated. After the dry run execution on the Jenkins jobs, this is the file which we have generated, pipeline values.properties. And just giving one example out of it, the database information and the IS namespace. Those are one of the critical items which needs to get validated with the health check tool. I'm going to export the variable ITSM pipeline config file path to the same value of the pipeline values properties file which we created in the earlier step. Once that is set, I'm going to start the health check tool execution with the pre-install option. It's executing. The execution is happening. It creates various daemon set to run in the background, and then it fetch up the information related to the validating the parameter from the pipeline's configuration file. For example, the database host is validating, then it just validated the RSS URL by making the REST connection. It's doing rest of the checks now. The execution is finished, and it has 8 errors and 2 warnings in it, and the system is not ready for the installation. The HTML report is created in the same way how it used to happen on the ITOM side, and there is also the text representation of the logs. Like this, it complained about the connection to the database, and the wget and the nc for a few of the hosts has failed. I also opened the HTML output of the same, and those errors will be displayed on the top, and the warnings will also there. If you look at the top row, it tells about the execution of the ITSM Jenkins configuration file validation. So that is a distinction item between the normal pre-install run and the one when you run it on the ITSM Jenkins configuration file validation. After those errors are fixed, then you need to uncheck the checkbox and run the ITSM installation. After those errors are fixed, then you need to rerun the health check tool, make sure it is not showing any errors after the execution in the conclusion, and once confirmed, then you can proceed with the rest of the installation of the item. And that time you need to uncheck the checkbox of the dry run and then proceed with the install. Health check tool is a live tool. We keep on updating depending on the suggestions coming from the customers, issues that we found, and the new releases which happens. If you have any feedback or comments, please feel free to open the community link and then provide your feedback on those links. That will really help us to go further on the road path of improving the customer's experience. In this slide, I have highlighted some of the good quotes coming from the customer, which really motivated us to improvise the health check tool in the upcoming releases. A quick recap. In this video, we saw how does the ITSM Jenkins input file validation works, the overall process, where does the health check tool fits into this process. We saw the demonstration of the execution of the health check tool to make the validation of the Jenkins pipeline, and then we saw where you can mention your comments and the feedbacks on the health check tool on BMC community link. This concludes this part of the video and also the current video series. Thank you everyone.